What's up, everyone? This is the Next Take Podcast, episode 29, with Mikel and
Tanyka.
And
where we have
Tefon.
different
This is Mikel.
conversations on different topics. It's okay. So we have a special guest on the podcast. He is an artist and slash illustrator. Tefon Nelson. What's up, man?
Not much. Just kind of dying with this weather being back and forth right now these days.
Mhm.
Oh yeah, I know. I know the feeling. I'm sure Tanyka knows the feeling too.
Yeah, Canada for you.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, it's Canada.
Yeah.
So you're also from Toronto, Canada as well. So uh so explain to me like how's being an artist uh here.
Um, it's honestly it's interesting because for the most part, I think there's always like pluses and negatives no matter where you are. But I think
Right.
a big thing with being like in Canada,
Mm-hmm.
especially like for example, if you want to like push yourself, say like on social media and stuff like that, a lot of
Right.
times the focus is on say like the States, Japan, and those kind of places when it comes to art. So
Mm-hmm.
say you're an artist, say you're from Canada, a lot of times the connections you can get are not necessarily the same, despite it's
Oh yeah.
not something you would see like on the outside. So like for example, if you're just like a casual person who like see some art online, you're like, oh, I like this. You're gonna be like, okay, cool, I like this. Now this will show up in your feed and stuff like that.
Mm-hmm.
That stuff doesn't happen as much with Canada. Like I've opened even like sometimes like even like the stuff for like ads and whatnot to see like where you would have your stuff like advertised to,
Mm-hmm.
and you would see like
Interesting.
if you put your account as a US account versus a Canadian account, what you would get
Right.
as advertisement is very different. So
Mm.
it's like a hurdle. But
Does that has to do with like Instagram, or does it have to
um
do with like all the
it's
social media
so
platforms?
though that is like the main one I've seen. Like I've looked through like
Right.
Meta's advertisements, and yeah, it's
Mm-hmm.
very skewed towards very specific countries. And
Right.
despite, like Canada's obviously a well-known country and whatnot, but nobody ever really focuses on us. So we're kind of
Mm-hmm.
like America's lapdogs almost.
That is
Yeah.
so true. That
Yeah, it
is so
is.
true.
Yeah, so
Exactly. Yeah,
yeah,
that's
it's like
true.
yeah, there's always like that. Oh, it feels almost like being like second class almost in that sense. But
Mm-hmm.
apart from that, like
Yeah.
there's nothing really off-putting about it. I've had, I think, a few times where like I'd be like, it would be nice to meet a few artists and stuff like that in Canada.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
Yeah.
and I have noticed a lot of times, even like with like Canadian artists, it's really
Mm-hmm.
hard to get in contact or have conversations with a lot of them because I guess a
Mm-hmm.
lot of their focus is on trying to like get outside of Canada or like
Yeah.
be
Yeah.
seen outside of
I
Canada
hear
because
you.
all the opportunities are like the States and stuff like that. So you don't really
Right.
focus on like the
That's true.
people around here and stuff like that for the most part. Yeah, apart from that,
Mhm.
it's all right. There's no other like
Okay.
issues
Issues
with
and
it.
anything like that. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. I do 100% agree with you with everything what you said. So yeah. Okay. So what are we talking about, Tanika, today?
So today we are going to be kind of having a debate slash discussion on AI. This is the last episode of our little mini series of
Mm-hmm.
AI. So that's kind of what we're going to be doing. We're going to kind of talk
Right.
about maybe 3 key points where we can kind of just have a little discussion on the pros and the cons or where maybe you
Right.
stand with AI.
Right. Okay.
All right.
Okay.
All right.
Let's begin.
All right. So, one potential impact with AI could be in the job market, which we have kind of talked about in the previous episodes. So, obviously, with AI increasing, there's the capable of performing tasks traditionally usually done by humans could be switched and be done by machines instead. So, with AI, sure, it could maybe improve overall productivity, but there's also the ethical part of things of people losing their jobs because of it. So, where do we kind of stand with this? Who wants to go first?
Go ahead, Tef.
Okay, I could go. Okay. So my thing with it is, I think as a whole, the idea of AI is nothing new realistically, and I don't think it's ever really a bad thing to have like technologies like
Mhm.
this. I think the
Mhm.
big problem is kind of like what was just said, is that I think humans as a whole will always I mean, actually, no. I think the best way of putting it is, as a whole, humans are not necessarily trustworthy in the sense of being responsible when they have opportunities. And there are good people and there are bad people. There are people who will take AI and they'll use it the right way. Like, I think a very good example of a way I've seen people kind of handle and use AI in a, well, not use it, but kind of control how it's being used.
Mhm.
Is so I use this program for my art, Clip Studio Paint, right? And the
Right.
company for that, they were implementing a lot of like AI tools, I think 2 to 3 years ago, when they kind of announced that they're changing from the one-time purchase thing or whatever. Um, and a lot of times when they were bringing in AI features, the community would kind of shut it down real quick. So they would add something AI related. So it would be like, oh, you don't have to draw the line art for your work anymore. We can use AI to do that. The community would be like, hey, what are you doing? You add features like this, we're going to stop using this, because the whole idea is that you're supposed to draw yourself. You're supposed to use these tools to enhance or help your work flow. And things like
Mhm.
that is what's good with AI, right? So, like, for example, a next thing is in gaming, there's anti-aliasing, which gets rid of like all like the pixelation and stuff like that in games or whatnot, right?
Right.
That is technically an AI tool that reads the frames and rebuilds the frames based off of the understanding of previous and future frames. And the
Mm.
AI takes that, learns from it, and it builds a new frame within a
Okay.
few milliseconds, right? And there's always benefits like that to it, right? You can implement things through AI that really benefits the workflow. So
Mhm.
you can speed up a lot of things using AI, but at the same time, because humans as a whole are not responsible, it becomes an issue of, when it becomes to advance, what's going to happen? You're going to make people
Yeah.
lose their jobs. And we're already in a
Yeah.
place where stuff like inflation kind of ruins a lot of jobs in the first place, because these jobs that we're able to live off of 10 years
Mm.
ago are now not even feasible to live off of. Even when you have a partner these days, you can have those same jobs you had maybe 20 years ago, and that's not enough. So, with AI now becoming like
Mhm.
a very rapid thing, it really takes a lot of like jobs away from people. So, as a person who likes AI as a whole, but I know how irresponsible we are. Um,
Right.
I'm not I'm not on the side of like what AI is doing these days. Ever since like the like Chat
Mm.
GPT started, I already knew that was like it. And it's
Yeah, me
funny
too.
because I always make the joke that we are literally going into that same society of the game Near Automata, because
Mm-hmm.
what essentially happened in that is they allowed technology to become so advanced that it took over the human race, right? And that's essentially what's happening at this point. We allowed it to get so advanced to the point where it's starting to get to that point. But the thing is,
Mm-hmm.
we have that control. The thing is, we have to know where to limit it. And it doesn't seem like people really know where to limit it. So
Mm-hmm.
it is problematic at this moment to me, but I still am kind of hoping to see that like we can kind of turn it around and use it the right way.
Okay.
Yeah,
I agree with that.
I yeah, 100% agree with that. I have nothing to say on that.
You have nothing to add?
But like, yeah, nothing to add, to be honest with
Okay.
you. But like, other than like, how companies use it to just like cheapen, uh, not hiring like, artists, like that's I feel like it's a problem.
Yeah,
That's an issue for you guys. Um, they shouldn't be using in that way. They should be using it in a way that, it could be a tool for them. So,
exactly.
yeah, yeah, I, like I said, I do agree 100%. Also, do you think like, we're heading to like something like, do you know the video game Watch Dogs?
Yes.
Yeah. Do you think we're heading there in, in terms of AI?
I I I think we are starting to at this point.
Mm-hmm.
If you were to ask me this like 5 years ago, I would have been like, no.
No.
AI
Okay.
hasn't like hit that point yet, but now
Okay.
we've hit like that threshold where now it can advance really fast. And yeah, it seems like that's where we're pretty much just about to be at.
Okay. Yeah. Okay.
Hmm.
Well, like I said, I support you guys, and then I also I don't have any like hatred towards AI in any type of form, but like I also support the artists as well. You see the page I have on Instagram.
Oh yeah.
I
Oh yeah,
support
you're a good
both.
supporter. Yeah.
Yeah,
I
yeah,
always
I support.
so one of those things like
Go
I
ahead.
see like always like the conversations being had on there, and like for the most part like
Yeah.
I'll like a few comments that I'll see like on like the side of like digital art or regular art versus AI art and stuff like that.
Oh yeah.
But
Yeah. Yeah.
the reason I've never like added to the conversation that I'll see on there is because like for the most part everybody just seems kind of like they're at war with each other, and I always say like
Mm-hmm.
that's not productive at that point, right? And I like how you always
Yeah.
like kind of
No.
deal with it, where it's like, hey, yeah, like I'm not discriminating against anybody, like I'm here to like show everybody love, and that's
Mm-hmm.
realistically what it should be, right? And I always tell like
Yeah.
people like when it comes to AI art, like I actually don't necessarily have anything against it as a whole. I think it's just again
Yeah.
how people are as a whole. People are very like they're not reasonable overall, right? So like for example, there'll be
Yes.
the AI artists that like I'll look at AI art, right? And I'll be like, oh, this is cool, or whatever, right? And sometimes I'll see it and I'll be like, oh, this is a piece of motivation for me. And I'll screenshot and I'll be like, okay, this person's work right here, that's
Mhm.
inspiration for me right now, right? And it can be
Beautiful.
used positively like that, right? Um,
100%. Yep. Yep.
and then there's levels to it though, right? And there's
Mm-hmm.
like I remember there was one person I was talking to from work one time, and he was asking me about if I use like AI and stuff like that as a whole. And I was like, I like a lot of it because like I specifically bought like last year the Google Pixel 7 because it was a phone
Mm-hmm.
that was advertising a lot of like AI features, and I was like having all these things to enhance the way I'm using my phone or enhance the way I'm doing things is always
Right.
beneficial overall, right? But
Yeah.
then he was there talking about like, oh, that he knows like I draw. Do I would I use AI for that or whatever? Am I against it? I'm like, I'm not against it in the fact of like, for example, say for your phone, you want some like wallpapers for your phone, right? And what you want
Mm-hmm.
doesn't exist. If you went on like a AI program and created some wallpapers for your phone, I actually think that's
Yeah.
a absolutely fantastic way where AI is very
Yeah.
beneficial. But then when I've seen situations come up online where there's legitimately people who've drawn things, spent like 40 hours drawing things for like a convention, and they've actually had issues at the convention where somebody assumed that they were using AI because somebody else at that convention had art there using AI to
Mhm.
create art. And one of the samples that the AI used was that other person's art that was actually at the convention. And
Wow.
it became an issue for them. I wish I remembered the name of the person I
Mhm.
seen online talking about it, because they were really frustrated
Mhm.
about it. And the thing was, a lot of the artists at that convention knew that that other person's art was AI, because one thing you'll notice if you're an artist, right? And
Right.
that's why, like, part of why I'm not so bothered by the AI art in general is most artists can actually look at AI art immediately and tell it's AI art. There's always a very specific thing to it that kind of makes it
Mhm.
obvious, and it doesn't make it look bad or anything like that. It's just like how like every artist has their own style.
Yeah.
So with like the AI, it becomes an issue of that where it's like people will do really nasty things. Like you're going to a convention selling art that's similar to somebody else's there using AI, and now everybody might turn and shun the wrong person because your AI decided to copy that person's style, and that person can't
Right.
really do anything about it, right? And it kind of sucks overall when things like that happen, but at the same time, it's like it's like hurdles you got kind of got to just get around as a whole. And
Mhm.
I think art is one of those hurdles for AI that's gonna be a really rough turning point,
Tough.
because I think
Yeah.
there's a lot of places where using it even in like ways that would be seen as, say, like malicious or um I guess ways that don't have too much integrity. There's not many ways
Mhm.
where it will ever really cause an issue to like the general public, but this is
Right.
like one of
Yeah.
those ones where it will, because I feel like because the way AI in general works, it learns, right?
Mhm.
And say you
Yeah.
start taking all the jobs from artists, what ends up happening? The only thing the AI can learn from is the AI, and everything will become the same
Mhm.
and stagnant over time. So it's one of those things where like the balance will always be there. So I think
Yeah.
the community as a whole just needs to be able to like stay together and stop fighting over these things. Because like for example,
Oh
the
yeah.
next one
100%.
I see. So obviously, obviously Threads exists. Um, for my Threads account, I see a lot of those conversations being had and people like being mad that, oh, these AI artists exist and stuff like that. And I'm just like, just don't follow them. Just don't like their stuff. If you don't like it, it doesn't really matter. Let them exist. Let them do what they're doing, right? If they don't affect what you're doing directly, hey, it is what it is. Like I I think as a whole, what the biggest problem with everything is that like everybody's so focused on what everybody else is doing. Just focus on what you're
That's
doing.
in
And I remember
general
I
though.
seen, yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
that's it though. It's in general though, and people don't learn that. I think a lot of it is actually like I've seen things where like for example, a lot of homes where like um adults would teach their kids to not worry about what that next person's doing, right? And they'll generally understand what their parents are saying, right? But then they'll see their parents be like, "Hey, my friend's coming over. Make sure the place is spotless. Oh, we don't need people talking about us and stuff like that." And it's like you kind of teach that opposite narrative at the same time. Now people are now seeing that and being like, oh, these people might think this of me if I don't have this, or if I don't got this kind of engagement on this platform, people are going to think of me this way. And it starts to
Mhm.
stress people out in ways where now they're trying to find reasons and excuses to not be able to keep up with what they need to do. And I think like everybody is responsible for themselves. So if you think, for example, AI is in the way of what you're doing, just step it up. And I know it's easier to say stuff like that, but
Yeah.
at the same time, as a person who's been drawing for years. I haven't done too much with my stuff because
Mm-hmm.
I've made the excuse of, oh, I'm always working, I'm always tired because I was doing like labor intensive stuff with work and whatnot. And then
Mm-hmm.
when I finally got a new position where I wasn't doing something labor intensive, because I already had that mindset, I was kind of doing the same thing still, and I wasn't tired. It's just I kind of got used to it. And it wasn't
Mm-hmm.
until like I think maybe 2 months ago, it kind of clicked in my head that I was doing the same thing still. And now I'm like in the progress of doing a lot more things. I'm working on like a website now. um I
Mm-hmm.
You've known I've been working on like a manga for like years now, and the
Yeah,
reason
yeah,
why is
yeah,
because
yeah.
I would start it, I'd get halfway through a chapter two, and then I'd be like, let me scratch this and let me start over. Let me scratch this, let me start over. And the
Right.
reason why I would always do that is because I'll take breaks in between while I'm in the middle of
Right.
doing it. So it's like
Okay.
you gotta be able to just tell yourself, hey, if I need to do this or I want to do this, don't make an excuse. Just do it.
Mm.
Don't focus on what the other person's doing. And with
Yeah.
AI, everybody's just gonna sit there and focus on what the other person's doing. So
Yeah.
just let everybody have their fun.
Yeah.
And yeah,
Yeah. Well, yeah, 100%. Before you go to
yeah.
the next question, Tanika, hold on, give
Yeah.
me a second. Do you remember when, like, people, used to hate on like digital art at the time, like years ago? Um, do you feel that it's the
Yes.
same energy with, yeah, it's the same energy with AI right now?
So I remember seeing a conversation about that one time. I
Mm-hmm.
don't think it is. I do think the idea behind it is very similar, but I do think the energy is a bit different because there's still
Mm-hmm.
like a bit of I think it's really the integrity behind it that causes a lot of the issue right now. Because for example, right, if what's a good example for this? Okay, yeah, here's a good example, right? So I think
Right.
a good example is the speed running community, right? So there's tasks, which is tool assisted speed runs versus human ran speed runs, right? Um
Right.
those are like the two bases of what speed running is, right? And
Mm-hmm.
task speed runs exist, though those are computer made ones that are essentially you can't do that yourself, right? It's not very realistic, a lot of them. So like they'll do like
Mm-hmm.
100 frame perfect things, clip through walls and stuff like that are realistically possible to do. It's just a human couldn't pull it off because, for example, you can't spam a button within a second 60 times to pull off a move that will
Right.
cause a glitch, right? So there's stuff like that, right? And when people make those, right, you'll make a tool assisted speed run and you can get a world record using it, right? But that will never
Mm-hmm.
be put in the same frame as a person doing an actual speed run. I think the difference between what a tool assisted speed run and a human assisted speed run is a kind of like the equivalent to that, right? And then I think in
Mm-hmm.
the middle is like versus like the digital art versus hand drawn art is more closer to using a ROM to emulate a game and using that for a speed run versus speed running using the original property, essentially. That way everybody's kind of equal using the original property, but with the emulated version of something, you might have a disadvantage or an advantage based on how well something performs for you, or new glitches might be able to be um, abused or something like that based off of using emulation. So it's like it's one of those ones where it's like you're still doing the same thing, but we don't like the way you're doing it, as opposed to something's being done in a way that isn't very feasible for the average person, but
Mm-hmm.
um you're getting credit for it, right? And I think it's one of those ones where it's like I don't see, for example, if you would Google something like the Super Mario 64 speedruns, since those are very popular, and you were to put
Yeah.
like task world record, right? You're not gonna think, oh, say, I think the current world record for regular, like the regular like human ran one is a guy named Sweegie or something like that. I can't remember, but
Hmm. Hmm.
say like he made a task and had the world record task. You're not gonna be like, hey, Suiji's task record is amazing. This, that, blah, blah. You're not gonna talk about the person who made the task. You're gonna
Mm.
talk about the task as itself because you understand it's a computer ran
Right.
code that created that task, right? And I
Okay.
think
Yeah.
that's kind of like where the issue became an issue overall because I've seen like people like going like, oh, thanks for my art. Um, and it was just AI art. And there'll be ones that I remember I forget the app I used to be on as and I used to be like
Mhm.
one of the people managing it. And a person went on there using AI art, right? And overall there was people using AI art on there, but they were always very open about it, and nobody had an
Mhm.
issue with it until one person came on using it, kind of taking credit for it being completely their art, being
Mhm.
saying that, oh, but oh, I created this. And it's like, sure, you might have put prompts into a system that created it, but putting prompts into a system doesn't mean you can create this. A person who drew something digitally can draw it on paper as well. A lot of times it's very uncommon that somebody can't draw something on paper but they can draw it on digital. The opposite way around, there's a lot of times where you can see people draw stuff on paper and then you can't draw well on digital, but it's because digital also has a form of assistance through AI that's always existed
Mhm.
too. And I can that's like the very
Yes.
small point where it became an issue for that original hand-drawn community where it's like, hey, you're getting assistance, right? But
Mhm.
overall, assistance is never overall
Yes.
real issue, right? So I think like the difference
It's just tools, right? It's just
exactly,
tools that you.
exactly. And I think that's kind of like where the level of it goes to. I do think there is
Mhm.
an argument to be made though for AI that you're technically using tools as well. It's just that if you were to take away those tools, can you still do what you're doing? And I think that's where the big question comes from it. That's why I think it's very different overall. Because
Mhm.
overall, I haven't met, I could be wrong, because obviously I don't do research on these things,
Mhm.
but I haven't met a
Mhm.
digital artist that can't take that same line art that they did digitally and they can't do it on
Mhm.
paper. And I would even argue that I'd probably bet that most digital artists were able to take that same line art that they did digitally and they can do it easier
Mhm.
on paper and faster on paper. It might not be as clean,
Mhm.
and that usually is the only difference. And I think
Hmm.
the reason why people got past that argument of digital versus hand drawn was because they
Mhm.
realized a lot of times that's really all it was. Because I remember even like for me when I was first drawing hand drawn, right? I feel like
Yeah.
even now with my digital art, my hand drawing art from when I first started switching over was better then than even my digital like line art right now. I still think it's
Mhm.
very like um messy, and I feel like it can feel more like I feel like I can do better strokes and stuff like that than what I'm doing.
Right.
And it comes out a lot better on paper because it's just how naturally like you there's emotion to like every stroke you do when drawing. And when you do a line, right? And you get a line that's with that slight zigzag in it on paper, right? You understand that that came from what that person can do with their hands, right? Versus on digital, you might get that same line, but it comes out completely straight. It doesn't, you don't feel that same authenticity with it. And I guess like that kind of moments where you first kind of see that, it's like, wait, what's going on here? Like this doesn't look authentic until you kind of realize and you start trying it for yourself that
Mhm.
it's not that simple. It's not about feeling authentic at that point. It's whether or not you were able and capable to get that to work for you. And
Okay.
with AI, the big difference on where I guess the way it's being seen through like the arguments like back and forth is that like you will never get to that point when you're doing AI where you're like, oh, that stroke right there is my emotion. This right here is my emotion. This drawing is how I actually feel. Like I think the biggest point that I think was always that, and I think where people really started to understand recently where the issue was, and I saw like this conversation on like Facebook. So obviously with Toriyama's passing, rest in peace,
Yeah.
he
I don't think Tanyka knows who that is.
I mean,
oh, okay,
You know
I'll
who?
explain.
You know who? How the Dragon Ball creator is? That's
no,
who
I never
he
knew
is.
who he was, but okay.
Oh,
Okay.
okay, yeah,
Oh, Akira
so
Toriyama. Yeah,
Okay.
yeah,
that's his name. That's his name too. Yeah. Go ahead.
yeah, so yes, so speaking of Dragon Ball, right? So I see there's a lot of people obviously who drew things. I've drawn Gohan for a way to just express
Oh yeah.
celebration of him. People
Yeah.
draw whatever to express how they felt, right? And that's kind of like what art is all about overall, right? Of course, there's like the business aspect if you're good at it and you got the time to kind of invest in like selling yourself, and you can get to that point where people want your style and whatnot in their work, they'll pay for it, right? But apart from that, um what it's
Mm-hmm.
about is that emotion where people want to say their farewells to him. So you draw something that kind of expresses how you feel. You put a little note, a little caption with it, expressing how it felt to hear this news. And it's like a way to celebrate for the community, right? And
Mm-hmm.
when it kind of gets a bit iffy is when you start getting the people who post the AI art, right? And then people are like, oh, why? Like, I'm not even joking. You've probably even seen the image. There's an image that's been going around where they're holding up a casket for him with a bunch of Dragon Balls on it, right? And because
Right.
AI
Yeah.
doesn't understand the lore behind Dragon Ball, it drew like, I think 12 Dragon Balls on it, right? And everybody's just like, this is to post this. Even if you were gonna post it, you should have edited the picture to kind of like
Mm-hmm.
be accurate to what the man has done. This is it's kind of like it feels like, oh, this is your cash grab. This is your moment to try find a way to advertise and build something off of a guy's passing who was genuine to it, and he's shown
Mm-hmm.
nothing but love to everybody. And it's kind of like a spit in the face when you do something like that, because it feels like you weren't being authentic. And then you'll have people in the comments making excuses for them, saying, oh, it doesn't matter. This is just how they're expressing how they feel. And it's like, if you were expressing how you felt, you would have made sure to express it correctly, right? And if you actually, and there would be that point where it's like, okay, you can argue that, oh, he doesn't know how to express how he feels, and that's why he used AI. And it's like, for me, that was one time where I actually commented on these kind of conversations, and I said, if you felt this way about him and you can't draw, you would draw anyways. You just wouldn't share it if you don't feel like it's worth sharing. You can express stuff to yourself. You don't have to show it to the world because you felt, oh, I can't draw good enough, and you decided to say, hey, I'm going to use AI to go make this cool image and post it to the world. That doesn't show that you actually care. And that's why overall it
Yeah.
becomes that
A
argument.
problem. Yeah.
And yeah, and it's like people just got to learn how to like balance that act overall, because like posting it is cool to me. I have no issue with it, but it's like in that kind of case, you're kind of spitting on a guy's face doing that. And he if he was alive, he probably still wouldn't even think anything of it, because he was actually genuinely a pretty cool guy. You'll see that like you've never heard nobody talk down on the guy, because the guy doesn't do anything to be talked down on. He's just been a guy who's opened doors for people. And I'm pretty sure if he was to sit there and advocate and say, hey, AI art's cool, it would be pretty almost like disingenuous to post something like that and not be able to at least take the time to make sure you got something accurate when you were doing so. And it's sad because I've seen people repost that picture more than I've seen them post people's actual like legitimate like hard worked art where they spent hours and hours, probably dropped tears for this guy in the moment doing so. And people are sharing this inaccurate photo, misrepresenting what the guy's works was. And it's like those kind of people is what creates this argument that people have against AI art. And people, when people band against something, they just take things to a whole next level.
Yeah, I 100% agree, Tefon. Yeah, that's really sad that people use AI art to just for somebody's death. So yeah, that's extremely sad. That's
Yeah.
All right, next question, Tanyka.
Okay.
What do you have for us?
So the next thing is AI in terms of ethical implications, which I think we kind of just talked about a little bit, but let's go a little broader than just in art a little bit. So as AI becomes more advanced, there's obviously concerns about the potential misuse or the abuse of the technology. So far as an example, which we kind of did talk about in the previous episode of the series, in terms of, surveillance could be manipulated, more like automatic weapons could be an issue. So what do we kind of think in terms of the ethical aspect of things?
Do you want to go on this, Tanyka, or
Me?
do you want to?
Sure.
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay.
Go.
So when it comes to like the ethical side of things in terms of people being kept safe and all of that, I personally feel like it could be a huge issue if not getting under, like if it's not under control. And we did talk about like the regulations, the laws hopefully coming into effect, but of course those things take a long time. But with surveillance in terms of like facial recognition, which we talked about, and the implication of using a technology like that and completely backfiring on people of color, in particular Black people. And I think the biggest thing is, which we said before too, is if you're going to use the technology, that's great, but check your work. We went through school always being told, proofread, check your work, do all that. So the same should apply with AI technology. Don't rely on it alone. And even though AI can be used for a lot of good, there is the other side of it where it can be used for bad. And there are people who are naturally just not great people and are going to use AI to their advantage. So there's also that, and that's where the problems can begin with the use of AI. AI doesn't become what it is unless the data is being put into it. But when you have bad people putting that into it, all it's going to end up doing is getting worse and worse and worse. And then when it gets to the point where AI is able to think on its own, what exactly are we going to encounter? That's my fear with AI in general.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that.
Yeah.
Go on, Tef. Go on. Do
you have any more to say?
Oh yeah, I have to add on to it. Because honestly, even some of the things she said, I didn't even think about. Like things were like when it comes to like say like weapons and whatnot, and it made me just realize even now, even when it comes to like that same stuff like security and whatnot, that can be an issue because you already have places and people like hacking groups, right?
Mhm.
That do all kinds of things that obviously are very threatening to society as a
Yeah.
whole, right?
Yeah, me and
Imagine
Tanyka talked
if
about that.
Yeah, we did in the previous
Yeah.
episode too. We did
Yeah.
talk
oh
about
yeah.
that. We did.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah, but go on, go on, go
Yeah,
on,
no,
go
Yeah.
on.
keep going. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, okay. Yeah, so it's interesting because like I didn't even think about what if AI learns to just sit there and hack everything overall,
Mhm.
right?
Mhm.
Because yeah, it's a tool that learns over time, right? And gets better with time. And it doesn't necessarily have to get better in the right ways, right? Um, and that is a very big security risk as a whole. And like yeah, we've seen all those movies, games, shows, and stuff like that that talk about society where like AI runs things and whatnot, right? And of course, things at some point can become like that, but there could even just be like, even if it never did get to that point, we can have the issues of like the world just becoming stagnant after a while, right? Because say 100 years from now, right, we're relying on AI technology, and then we finally get that one person who decides, hey, we're just going to destroy the entire AI network, right? And they can corrupt it somehow, right? How do we survive at that point? Because the likelihood of being able to do what we were able to do today 100 years in
Yeah.
the future where AI is doing everything for you is very
Mhm.
unlikely. Like I what was it? Even with like phones and phone numbers, right? Um what like back when it was like high school days for us, right? Um we had to remember like 10, 15, 20 numbers, right? And
Mhm.
it was because you didn't have a way to just keep track of everything. Not everybody had a cell phone during
Mhm.
that time frame, right? So you just had to know
But
those
we had a
numbers. So or
but
even
we
have
have
like
a
a phone book.
calculator.
Yeah, yeah.
Well, he's talking
Calculator. I
phone
forgot
number.
about that. Yes. No, you could. So you were able. So some calculators back then, you were able to save certain things on them, right? You can actually like save even phone numbers on them. But even then, right?
That was even new technology even then, though.
Yeah. Well,
Mm.
yeah. Oh, that was like expensive calculators. Yeah, those are like $50 calculators, I
Yeah, I
think,
didn't
back
have
then.
those.
So yeah, I didn't have them either, but I've definitely seen them.
Oh.
But even then, like yeah, you
Yeah,
had to even use calculators even for like multiplication and stuff like that, right? And even
Mhm.
I'll see even now like a lot of people post things. Actually, just today I seen a post of somebody showing how to do the timetable up to 10 very easily, where you just write 1 2 3 on like the next number over or whatever. And then I thought about it, I was like, why does this matter? You're supposed to actually know how to do it and get to these
Mhm.
Mhm.
calculations, not a fast way to cheat your way around it. And you're never going to actually know the multiplication if you do it that way. um
Mm.
I mean, we can
or
get into
what.
a conversation about that because, again, how we learned in school, having to use, memory and all of that, that is not the case now. Schooling is so different now than it was when we were in school. You couldn't rely on the calculator. Now they do.
Oh.
And it's like,
Yeah.
Yeah.
how?
Yeah, it's so different because yeah, it's interesting because I see that even like teachers apparently now teachers have like tools to try see if something is written through AI and stuff like that, but the tool isn't even accurate in itself because
Mm,
they don't really have a way to like keep track of what people are doing what. And realistically, it's like you shouldn't even need to use a tool, and it's not because I think what the kids are doing is right or wrong or anything like that, but it's more so just the fact that even down to our teachers at that time frame, right? They had to sit there and kind of do everything themselves. They had to learn how everybody spoke, wrote, stuff like that. They had to learn how like to actually read illegible writing, like writing that people couldn't actually read. They had to learn to do that stuff just to make sure they kind of had that communication with the kids that they were working with. and that they can be trusted to do that job for them, right?
Mm.
A lot of it now is being done on computers. I'm seeing like, for example, people can't even read clocks, like 12-hour like
Yeah.
analog clocks.
Oh yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. I
And
saw
it's
something like that.
interesting. Yeah, it's
I, s-
interesting because
I
like,
saw a clip. I saw a clip of a kid not reading. I was like, what?
I
How
learned
can you
that in
not read
grade
that?
one.
yeah, and
Grade
that's the thing.
one.
Yeah,
And the weird thing
yeah.
about it is, okay, sure, we do use digital clocks most of the time now, but a lot of the times those clocks are still in the classrooms, and it's like nobody really ever thought of, hey, we should know how to read what we see up there moving.
Hmm.
Hmm. I mean, digital clocks was a thing even when I was in school learning the
Yeah.
analog
Right.
clock, but you still
Right.
had to learn, and you didn't, from my memory, at least in elementary school, I don't recall ever seeing digital clocks in the classroom. They
Mm.
always were
No.
analog,
Yeah.
and you had
Yeah.
to learn how to, and honestly, I feel like a lot of things are put on parents now to kind of teach their kids that that is not being taught in the schools
Oh.
anymore. I
Oh.
mean, and that's just
100%.
100%.
one thing. It's one example of that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I understand the Roman numeral clocks, but
Oh,
I
that's
don't.
one
I
thing I do
understand.
understand. I know how to read it for the most part myself,
Yeah.
but like,
Yeah.
yeah, I don't expect people to know how to do that.
No,
Yes.
that's I stop at like 4 or 5 because I'm like 10. I
Yeah.
maybe can make it to 10, but it's
Yeah.
I that always confused me. It's letters and
Hmm.
that always confused me. So yeah, that's not so much of an issue. Like I
Yeah.
don't expect necessarily for people to understand Roman numerals, but to
Hmm.
read an analog clock, yeah, I feel like that's a basic expectation that you should know. Like I remember like my brother's like 12 years younger than me, but I remember him saying to me, although I think he did learn, um, he said like, well, why do I need to look at the analog clock when the digital clock just tells me? Like that's the generation that we're in, and it's like, oh my
Yes.
gosh. Like, come on. Ugh.
Yeah.
Anyway,
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
so
Okay.
do we have anything to add to
Uh,
that or?
I don't have anything. You guys, like, said everything
I
that I was going to say. Go ahead. Go
Okay.
ahead, Tev.
I,
You're the boss.
I think there's one more that I can add. Like when it comes to like, I guess, storyboarding and writing, when it comes to like the AI
Hmm.
stuff, um
Hmm.
generally how it works, right, is if for example, right, you're looking to make a big, say, like Hollywood movie or whatever, right? Say you went and you
Hmm.
decided to use AI over a bunch of like writers. A lot of times what they would do is take obviously like the most successful movies, stories and stuff like that, and they'll use those as inspirations for their for whatever they want to create in art. Well, not
Hmm.
art, sorry, in like in, say, like a movie and whatnot, right?
Hmm.
And uh I do see that like there was like that Hollywood strike, and it was kind of like based around stuff like that.
Hmm.
Um,
Hmm.
Yeah, the writer's strike.
yeah,
Yeah.
and I find it was interesting because like you would think that like something like that would be a very big eye opener for a lot of people, but it didn't really seem to be as much as you would think, because what would end up happening is, say, like 10 years from now, right? Say they get rid of all their writers in Hollywood, right? And they just started using
Yeah.
AI for everything. What would end up
Hmm.
happening is they would first be sourcing all these and making like these stories and movies and whatnot that sound good for, like, for example, like if we started doing this, say, like starting this year, and use AI to create ideas for stories and whatnot, it would seem really
Hmm.
good right now because they have infinite possibilities through what their source material is, right?
Hmm.
But then what ends up happening 10 years from now, say they write, um, say, like within the next 10 years, about maybe 50 movies come out altogether that used AI as its source to create their stories. And they were very successful movies, right? What would end up happening is the AI in 10 years from now that they go to try make more hits out of would understand that they're trying to make more hit movies. So what ends up happening is they would end up sourcing their own material that was already AI'd, and they would end up just getting the same stories over and over again.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
And
exactly. Which I feel that's already happening without AI. So
yeah, yeah, and that's the thing. It's very interesting because like I am noticing it with a lot of like the AI stuff now. Is a lot of it is like pretty much starting to seem the same, look the same, and sound the same, because how much sources do you have versus how much an AI can produce, right? And I think that's always like one of the arguments of it, where it's like AI can produce things really fast, but what ends up happening when you got 10,000 people using AI to produce something versus 5 people who can get something done within that same time frame, while you have let's say like 100,000 people that got to take a few weeks to make up their things, right? But AI all use the same exact sources to produce what they did. You're starting to get similarities there, and then when they start doing that again, they do that same process again within the next few days. You're still using the same sources, and you're just going to get the same things over and over, versus somebody who, hey, today I had this idea, today I had this experience, which now molded my idea into this, and that creates new and unique experiences for everybody and everything surrounding it. And overall, like, I don't think a lot of the people who especially are in it just for like say like the money, and they just see it as, hey, we can work faster and we can pay less people, those people won't allow that to stop until they see it hurt their money. And yeah, I'm interested to see how things go like in 10 years because of that.
Yeah.
Because yeah, like right now, a lot of people are working hard and not being respected the way they should be through this situation.
Yeah, it will be interesting to see what happens in the near future in terms of like, Hollywood. I think they go back to Tanyka to the strike. And how many do you remember when's the deadline for the next strike?
Shoot.
Do you remember? If you
I
don't
can't
know.
remember.
I don't remember the date.
Yeah, I think it.
Okay.
I don't know if it was late, like the late 2020s, like 2027, 2028.
26?
Is it 2026?
Okay.
It could be 2026,
Sure.
but we could also be getting that confused with the TTC situation too. So I can't remember.
Yeah.
I know it's around there though, that there is the potential, but again, is that still enough time though to kind of figure out like where does AI play in when it comes to writing scripts? I don't know. Like I think it's going to take some time to see if AI were to take over script writing and everything. So I guess we'll see.
Yeah.
Okay. So let's move on to there's a lot. The next question, and the last question is AI and the impact in terms of personal privacy. So with AI, algorithms are able to analyze vast amounts of personal data. Questions do arise about how the information is used and how it is accessed. So some people argue that AI has the potential to greatly improve services and personalize experiences, while others worry about the potential for the abuse and intrusion into individuals' privacy. So what do we think?
So we've already seen this in like, phones, I think. Is that right? Am I being delusional?
Yeah. No, you're right.
Okay.
I was actually gonna make that same point if you didn't.
Yeah.
Right, yeah, you're already seeing this in phones, perhaps computers, perhaps our
not even just computers too. But it's more of you're being watched, and the sense of like if you're like, for me, like an example, like I always kind of heard you're being watched, or Facebook is watching you, or whatever. And I'm
Facebook,
like
your
whatever.
computer's watching you.
Yeah, I'm like, whatever, who cares? And I remember going on to the shoe company website, and then within minutes, I'm getting shoe company ads on my Facebook wall. And I'm just like, what the hell? What's going on?
I think there's a way to turn that off, though. Is there? Is there a way
So
to turn
there
that
I
off?
don't
there
know.
is a way, but the thing is, every app by default has it turned on, right? So it
Yes.
kind of screws you over in the
Yeah.
idea that they don't want you to realize, and
Hmm.
they'll put in their
Mm.
terms, right? But of course, they know nobody reads the
No one
terms of
reads it.
service.
Yeah.
So the idea is you make it so long nobody will ever see it, and then they'll
Yeah.
just do it. And it's it is really annoying because like I will search things like I'm one of those people that watches very random YouTube videos and stuff like that,
Hmm.
and
Hmm.
I will like I'll just go down a rabbit hole of anything if I'm just bored, right? And then I'll
Hmm.
start being like, hey, I want to Google about what I'm hearing and whatnot and see some details and information on it. And then I have
Right.
to say to myself, wait, let me open incognito because it's the only way the ads don't show up because I have to open incognito just to search something like baby shoes because I don't want baby shoes to be my ads for the next 2 weeks. And it's so frustrating. And
Yeah.
that kind of opens your eyes because that's the thing. I kind of had that same idea when it came to AI and like, oh, they're watching, they can hear you and stuff like that. I was like, I don't got nothing to hide. I don't really care what they're doing or not. But then when you start to think about like, even when they say, oh, these things are just to personalize your like experience, in what way does it really benefit you overall to just being heard
Hmm.
24/7? And you don't really know where this information's going outside of that, right? I know like you'll see like a lot like some apps these days like for example I would see the like legitimate like option an app saying, oh, to turn off the ability for these companies to sell your likeness and information to other companies and advertisement companies. And it's like, wait, excuse me? Why are you legally allowed to sell my information to another company to benefit yourself when I can't even do that? So
Mm.
Exactly.
Yeah.
and that's when
Yeah.
it becomes an issue because like I remember I think when I started realizing that and I started being like, okay, now I have an issue with this was I think Crunchyroll added that option to turn it off, I think
Right.
about 5-ish years ago. And I had the app when
Hmm.
they first added that option to turn it off, and I think they only added it because people started to realize that they were doing that, and people started to kind of be like, hey, we don't like people selling our stuff or whatnot, and they got called out on it, so they added the option and specifically announced that you can turn it off if you want, and never spoke about it again because of course they don't want you to turn it off. But it's like, okay, you have us paying for all these apps and whatnot, but you're allowed to sell our stuff, and we're supposed to pay for these apps where we can't use them. But these apps are going to be tracking us, doing all kinds of nonsense to us. And I do see that like some of these companies to a certain extent started adding things to kind of control those things. Like Apple and Google add to their phones now where um your phone identifies if something on your phone is being used unintentionally very easily. So like for
Hmm.
example, in the top right corner on Android phones, I know for Apple it's very similar. I just don't use an Apple phone, so I can't really
Yeah.
describe it.
I have
Hmm.
an Apple phone.
I have an Android.
Okay. Okay. So
Mm.
for at least us Androids, right? And I let me know what the iPhone's version of it is because I do know that they have it. But say like I go on Instagram, right? Um, there would be no notification for me. I do turn off most you like most accesses on like 99% of apps that I use, but
Yeah.
your phone will notify you if something's being accessed. So like your microphone or your camera, right? So if I go on like Snapchat, right, it immediately puts a green beam on the top right corner of the phone notifying you that your camera's on. And
Yeah.
when
That happens. Yeah. That happens to my
I have a
okay,
iPhone
question.
as
that's
Is
well.
this
Yeah.
on newer phones?
so I believe it's for Android, I believe it's anything Android 12 and up.
Yeah, see, I have 9. I'm still with 9.
Oh,
So I don't
okay.
get
So,
that. But that's
yeah.
probably still happening, even though I'm not getting the indication that it's
Yeah, so
happening.
yeah. So yeah, that's the thing, right? They can access it without you realizing at that point. Because yeah, if you
I
open
hate that.
yeah, because it's interesting because like I've had points where like it would notify me it's on, right? And it would be because sometimes like say you go to switch over to the camera on like say like Instagram and you close the app as you're going over to access it,
Mm.
the app will keep your camera on and you can have your phone dying in the background. It can be genuinely the app is not intentionally doing anything wrong, but it could even just save you from wasting battery doing stuff like that. And it's those kind of features are very important right now because of that. Because yeah, you just don't really know what's running in the background, right? Even like something as simple as sometimes on my phone I'll Shazam some music or whatever, right? um and it will notify me the mic's running for that, right?
Mm-hmm.
And that's good in itself, right? Because say
Yeah.
like I have another app that's sitting there and it can record my voice and it will use it to turn into something else, or it will send that information to somewhere else. At least I'll know, okay, there's something doing this. I can find what it is, identify it, and pull it up, right? And because it's something you can't really take out of it, and it's something that legally like isn't allowed to be on like the app store unless it can be indicated. It's a pretty good and important feature that it is a good thing a lot of companies are starting to implement, but at the same time it doesn't stop you from catching things like when people are stealing the information of the things you type on websites and stuff like that. Um, I'll see a lot of the companies are introducing like little features to kind of get away from even passwords and stuff like that. Like I think Google announced like their passkeys thing recently where they'll just make up random passwords for you and they'll
Oh,
just do everything else for you. And it sounds really good overall, but it's like when you have companies already doing stuff like selling your likeness and stuff like that,
yeah.
it's not a good idea to give them complete control over what your passwords are for your stuff. Because for example, your email has one of these passcodes and your other stuff are all connected to that email, right? And you use passcodes for those. Sure,
Mm-hmm.
for those other things, generally, if something was to happen where somebody hacked it, you can try to change the password before they get too far into your stuff and kind of save it, right? But if you put that passcode on your email that kind of controls everything, then you kind of get screwed because if something happens with that, you don't even know the password to begin with. So you can't even get on there to go save anything if you can't log in already. And that in itself is an issue because I've even seen people recently lose accounts, well, yeah, emails because they never knew the passwords because, like, for example, their phone always just logged in for them. They just never cared to figure out what the password was. Their phone's logged in for them. They go get a new phone. You at least got to know how to log into your email, and you kind of get screwed
Mm-hmm.
there because now you don't know how to do that. You might have a different phone number, and even that kind of becomes an issue too, where they have like the two-step verification that they try to force on everybody now, and even that in itself, it doesn't seem to really attempt to kind of understand situations, and it will do stuff like, oh, you need this your phone number to log into this, and it's like, okay, what if I changed my phone number? Like I lost my PayPal account because I got a new phone with a new phone number years ago, and
Okay.
they were not giving me access to it. I emailed them about it, and they're like, and even the people I emailed said they don't know what to do about it. They would suggest just making a new account. That's literally what they sent me as the email, and I'm like,
And that's
That's
not the
crazy.
solution. The two-step
exactly,
verification is great, but then there should be a solution for those people who
Mm-hmm.
do have their number changed. Like, whether it's you've lost your phone or you need a new number, or, you know, someone could be harassing you, you need to change your number. Whatever the case may be, there
Mm-hmm.
should be something in place where
yeah,
you're given the chance to be like, okay, I have a new number. So what do we do now? How do I update this information? Like, what do I do? You know,
yeah,
not create a
Yeah.
new account and you lose everything. That's not a solution.
so crazy.
Yeah, yeah, it is. It is crazy. Yeah, speaking about like the passwords and like the Google passwords and everything, like I have a Mac computer and everything,
Yeah,
and they always have a password for me, and it's a long ass password. It's like something that I wouldn't remember. So I'm always like, you know what? Let me edit password. Edit
Yeah.
password. Let me put my password in there. You know, because I'm not gonna remember it. It's like GA256.
Well, that's how.
Oh,
dash.
But
yeah.
about those
Yeah,
technically are more secure. Like that's something my grandpa does. My grandpa
yeah, they
uses those
are. Yeah,
generator ones. I think he uses
yeah.
like Norton or something. So the more like generated
Mhm.
ones, they are more safer. Yes, they're long,
Yeah,
but
they are. No,
you can make them shorter. It doesn't have to be this long ass thing. You can make them
Yeah.
shorter.
okay.
But that's the thing is like, so what do I do with that long ass password or that password that's like these letters and these numbers and
Mhm.
special characters that I'm going to have to remember those. I'm not going to remember it. So then I'm going to put them in
Yeah.
my phone to keep the password safe. But then what if my phone gets hacked and now this person has all my information?
Exactly.
Yeah,
So,
exactly.
you know, so
Yeah.
I mean, I do that already. Like with my passwords, I put them in my notes and my thing, but I lock them. But that still can be, someone can still get those. But I do that because I'm not going to remember the passwords. I need to remember the passwords for whatever reason.
Yeah.
And I need to make sure I have access to those things, but they're protected. But again, someone can just, honestly, to be
Yeah.
totally honest with you, they just need to know the one password and I'm screwed. They're going to know everything. So I'm like, okay, well.
Yeah, I mean that's the same for, well, I use like 3 different ones, but like overall, like, yeah, it's realistically, if you know one of my passwords, you probably figured out all of them
That's the
because
same thing with
one
me.
basically has access to all of it. So
Yeah.
Hmm. That's the case with me
Yeah.
too.
Wow. Okay. Yeah. But I try to make it different with all of them, like slightly, but like
But you're still kind of in the same boat. It's of if they kind of need to know one, and they'll know the others.
yeah, and the thing I realized so I used to do that same thing. What ended up happening though is I would forget which one is for which, and then it would get to a point where I have 10 versions of the same password, and I'll try 5 times on an account and get it locked.
And then you get
And I'm
locked
like,
out.
oh, well, now this was pointless. So now it's like I have. So technically, I think the best way to work with passwords is have your important password, which no matter what till the day that you die, unless you die, that's the only way somebody has access to that password. Have that kind of password. Have your password that you're okay if you have people figure it out. Where it's like, say, like for example, I had a password that I would use for say like Netflix accounts and like any like streaming account that like somebody might ask me for. That way I can just give them that password and I'm like, hey, if you know that password and you can remember it, you can watch whatever you want. I don't really give a damn, right? But then you have the password where it's like, you thought you were gonna go into my Google account? No, that's not happening. And that's kind of like the password where like you gotta be extreme with it where for those kind of passwords for me, I actually do that kind of stuff where it's like very random with like numbers and letters and stuff like that. Like there's a meaning behind what it is overall, so it's easy for me to remember. But like there should, I think that there should be passwords done like that. And I think even just those programs need to be more I guess transparent with the way passwords should be used as opposed to like trying to have Google use like their little features through like AI to create a bunch of like random passwords for everybody because that stuff is just gonna at the end of the day when something goes wrong it's not gonna save you because it's meant to operate a certain way. It's supposed to protect you, right? If you don't have the right information to show your identification or credentials, how can you be protected properly? And it's either it becomes too lenient or it becomes too restrictive and screws everybody over. So as a whole, like that stuff is just gonna become a mess.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
So do we have anything else that we want to add?
No, I don't have anything else to add. Is that the very last question?
That is the last question.
Okay.
Yeah.
So this ends episode 29 of the Next Tape podcast. The Next Tape podcast is available now on all podcast platforms. We also have a website called solo.to/next tape podcast. Tanyka, where else are we at?
We are on Facebook and Instagram at Next Take Podcast and Twitter and TikTok at Next Take Pod.
Okay, you can contact us on our email at mikeltanika@gmail.com. That is mikeltanika@gmail.com. So we talked about a lot about AI in general, which is awesome. Like I learned a lot from Tefon. I learned so much. Yeah. Tanyka. What else you want to say?
I mean, I don't have anything else to really add to the conversation,
Okay.
but thank you, Tefon, for coming on.
No problem.
Yeah.
I enjoyed it.
You can also plug in your socials, Tefon. Go ahead, do that.
Sure.
Yeah.
So I believe on pretty much everything. All my art related stuff is all just TEF visuals, like TEF, and then visuals. I'm not 100% sure if I changed everything to it as of yet, because I know there's some things I would go by TEFWorks on. Otherwise, yeah, those are like my handles on everything.
Okay. Cool. So we're thankful that you came on this episode of the Next Tape podcast, Tefon. We want you on more episodes in the future. So hopefully you'll come on and talk about different topics in the near future. Thank you. Appreciate you.
Yes, I appreciate your time. This was enjoyable. I like this conversation.
Yeah. All right. So I'm Mikel and
I'm Tanyka.
Tefon, come join, and you too.
Oh, and Tefon.
All right. And we are out until next week. Peace.
Bye.
Peace.